Okay, does it work now? Can you see my screen?
Yes, absolutely. Now it works.
So the PowerPoint is visible now, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So it's just a PowerPoint file and the rest of the files cannot be seen, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Now we can see the first slide of your PowerPoint.
That's lovely, brilliant, thank you. So do I have to start? I'm going to wait for you to just give me the signal and I'll start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's wait just a couple of minutes and then I will introduce you and then we may start.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Really appreciate for accepting the presentation and joining. You are the first speaker actually of the project. We think that will run throughout the year, different programs. You are the first one. And hopefully I do believe that it will be productive and very beneficial for everyone who will attend. Because now we are waiting for university in Tashkent, and they will join now.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks for the invitation. I would be very happy to deliver this talk, and hopefully it will be productive. And well, by the end of the day, some people would be happy. That's what I would like to do. So see what happens.
Yes, really appreciate. Okay, we may start. Now we have professors from Tashkent University. So let me introduce you. Professor Mahdi Dahmardeh is the Vice President of the Institute for Research and Planning in Higher Education, Professor of Applied Linguistics and Education at the University of Tehran, Islamic Republic of Iran. He is also head of Department of English Language at the Faculty of Foreign Languages and Literature of University of Tehran, Kish International Campus, as well as Editor-in-Chief, Journal of Foreign Language Research, Executive Editor and Research Platform Online Journal. And today, Professor Dahmardeh will talk about, can we afford to ignore culture? So you have like a half an hour, or if it's up to your presentation, 30 minutes, then we can go for Q&A section. Professor Dahmardeh, you may start, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Akbarov. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, professors, researchers, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here at this wonderful event. Well, I would like to thank Dr. Akbarov for inviting me to this amazing event. Let me change the slides because hopefully it will work. Yes. Okay. As it was pointed out, my name is Mahdi Dahmardeh, and I'm a professor of applied linguistics at the University of Tehran. The topic that I would like to talk about, as mentioned by Dr. Akbarov, is can we afford to ignore culture? And so technically, I'm going to talk about the role of culture in teaching foreign languages. This is a list of the topics that I would like to talk about. First, I'll start by the culture, the issue of culture. What is culture? Then culture in language teaching. And finally, I will present my conclusion. But before getting to that part, I would like to play a video. And I do hope that that video would explain a bit more about the issue of culture and why it's so important. So let me play this video, and hopefully this would be played. Let me get it run. Okay. Okay, let's see.
Polite. It's okay. What?
Bad luck.
ちゃんとヒロコ教えてあげなさいよ。
あんたの持ち方には好きがあるよ。
What did he say?
Okay, that was just a context in Japan, and the guy was visiting Japan, and as you could see, that was a problem here. It was mainly about the cultural issue and how the issue of culture could be manifested when people are visiting or interacting with, people from other contexts and cultures. So I would like to start this talk of mine about the issue of culture and giving you a very brief discussion on the definition of culture. I was wondering if my PowerPoint can be seen now, because it's just a PowerPoint
Yes,
file.
we can see.
Yeah? Okay,
Yes,
okay, thank
yes.
you. So the very first term that I would like to talk about is the term culture. What is culture? Well, the notion of culture is somewhat very problematic. It's very difficult to define culture. It was in 1952 that two American anthropologists, Kruber and Klochen, they critically reviewed concepts and definitions of culture, and they prepared a list of almost 164 different definitions. It was later on in 1994 that there was a scholar, Apter. He developed a 10-volume encyclopedia of language and linguistics. And in that encyclopedia, he summarized the problem as, despite a century of efforts to define culture properly, adequately, there was in the early 1990s that no agreement among anthropologists was reached in terms of the nature of culture. So, okay, but anyway, I'm going to categorize culture in three terms first. All right, first we've got the popular versus high culture. The popular culture, it includes the culture that is popular, easy to understand, and it's also very entertaining to majority of people, especially the youngsters. For example, we could say the pop music, we could say the Hollywood films, and so on. Then we've got the high culture. On the other hand, it may include Renaissance art, classical music, opera, and so on. So the high culture seems to be more sophisticated, it's intellectually challenging, and it's very rewarding. But based on this category, only a small group of people, they've got culture, and the rest are just followers. This way of grouping people is very much related to aesthetic rather than the social science. The next category is about primitive culture. So this definition of culture, it was introduced by Tyler in 1870s, I guess. So he believed that culture is a quality is possessed by all people in all social groups. So there is also another definition suggested by Tyler, and according to him, the culture is a complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits that are acquired by a man as a member of society. But you can see this definition is very much in contrast to the previous one, because in this one, all humans got culture, so they can acquire it by a membership in some social group or society. Although Tyler believed that all humans, they got they got a type of culture. The problem is that he believed that some groups, they've got their own civilized culture, which others, they may have the savage ones. Okay, now the third and the last use of culture, it was developed in anthropology. It was in the 20th century, and it was the work of Franz Boas. While scholars like Tyler, they're concerned with the universal character of a single culture, Boas emphasized the uniqueness of the many cultures of different people and societies. So according to him, an individual should never differentiate high from low culture, and no one should describe culture as savage or civilized one. Okay, now I don't know how many people are present here in this session, and if they could actually, the chat box is available for them, so they can send me messages here. But I'm going to ask you a question. So we've got a couple of images here. Which country do you think this lady comes from? Because I would like to make it like an interactive session.
From
so
India.
Anyone?
From India.
From India. Okay, Professor Jamila. I'm afraid I can't say your family name. But so you believe she's come from India. Okay, anyone else perhaps? No one?
Yeah, should be India, right.
Should be India. Okay, all right, that's great. I've got another question here. Which nationality do you think are most likely to enjoy surfing? We've got a surfing here on the right side. So which nationality do you think are most likely to enjoy surfing?
So probably ocean-bike countries.
Like, for instance...
Yeah, sea, ocean.
Perhaps Australia, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, let me tell you something. The very first image, she's not an Indian, she's British. She is just wearing the Indian costume, the dress, but she's a lady from Britain and she's never been to India at all. So the fact is, we've got some connotations when we see a picture, when we see an image, and we try to associate that image with some background knowledge that we might have, and that would give us some sort of explanation. Perhaps the reason why we're seeing this image and we see it from, let's say, Australia, or maybe some people might be saying from California in America, that is not the case, because this gentleman who's from France, and this is a French bay. So you could imagine, while people got some connotations that countries, these connotations might be coming from films that we tend to watch, you know, the very famous Jaws. I guess you've already seen the Jaws and all of those sharks and things that are happening. So these are the surfing issue that people might have these whole concept that perhaps they are related to. The culture is manifested differently in various layers. When an individual visits an office or organization, the way staff members dress, the way they behave, the way they communicate with each other, or even the scent and the feel of a place would present some cultural manifest that is associated with that environment. The culture has got impact on behaviors and even how these behaviors are interpreted. Some scholars like Officer, they believe that although certain qualities of culture are physically observable, their meaning is hidden. So the cultural meanings, it precisely lies and only in the way that these practices are interpreted by the insiders. Okay, for example, while a gesture might be interpreted as conveying agreement or approved or acceptance in the UK or Australia, it might be an insult sign in some other countries. Similarly, choice of clothing can be interpreted differently by different groups of people in terms of showing wealth, appropriateness, and so on. Now, I'd like to give you an example, and it's been taken from Seville, 1997. Seville observed an event at a nursery school in Navajo. And Navajo, they are Native American people of the southwestern of America. So here's the story, you know, a Navajo man opened the door to the classroom and he stood silently looking at the floor. The Anglo-American teacher, she said, "Good morning," and waited expectantly, but the man didn't respond. But the teacher then said, "My name is Mrs. Jones," and again waited for response. There was none. In the meantime, a child who was in the room put away his crayons and got his coat from the rack. So the teacher, noting this, she said to the man, "Oh, you are taking Billy now?" He said, "Yes." the teacher continued to talk to the man while Billy got ready to leave. And she was saying, Billy is such a good boy. I'm so happy to have him in class, and so on. Billy walked towards the man. Apparently it was his father, stopping to turn around and wave at the teacher and to say, bye-bye. And the teacher responded, bye-bye. The man remained silent and left. So what happened here? You know, why did the man say nothing? From Navaja perspective, the man's silence was appropriate. It was respectful. The teacher, on the other hand, expected not only to have the man return her greeting, but to have him identify himself and state his reason for being there. Okay, culture must be separated from universal human nature and individuals' personalities. You can see in this graph that culture can be learned rather than inherited. So humans learn culture behaviors and their norms from their surrounding environments. But we have to pay attention to the fact that culture is different from personality and human nature. Okay, human nature, like anger, like love, like fear, and so on, they all exist. They all exist, but the way that humans respond to these feelings is different. For example, how a man or woman may show their feeling to the opposite sex is a cultural behavior. You know, proposal behavior, you could compare that in Uzbekistan and in countries like Britain. So when it comes to personality, the story is a bit complicated. Some parts of our personalities are inherited and located in our genes, but there are other parts that can be programmed like a computer. So these learning parts, which include a package of programs, are cultural and personal experience. Okay, humans' biological procedures, they are affected by culture. Okay, eating, of course, it's part of our nature, but there are questions associated with these absolutely natural phenomena. Okay, what type of food am I supposed to eat? How much to eat? How many times do we have to eat? With whom do we eat? How to eat, including, of course, table manners. And the answers to these questions are all considered to be culture. Okay, let me tell you another story. And by the way, this story is true. Once there was a woman in Arizona who took, well, let's say somewhat a devilish interest in producing a cultural reaction. One day, she decided to hold a dinner party. Guests who came her way were often served with delicious sandwiches filled with meat and seemed to be neither chicken nor tuna. And when they were asking, what is this? She wasn't just explaining anything. She would just take the sandwich and help yourself. She then explained that what they had eaten was not chicken, not tuna fish, but the rich, white flesh of freshly killed rattlesnake. So you could imagine how they reacted. Lots of vomiting, often violent vomiting. So this is a dramatic illustration of how culture can influence biological processes. In fact, in this instance, the natural biological process of digestion was not only influenced, it was also reversed, you know. So of course, there wasn't anything wrong with that rattlesnake meat. Okay, nothing wrong with the rattlesnake meat, but that the cultural setting of people, they didn't expect to have such a sandwich. That is what happened to them. Now, culture is interrelated with social groups. Any behavior that is practiced by at least two people is considered to be culture. So these sets behaviors that are common among a group of people or in a society are called culture. And these behaviors are learned by the group members, and they're always changing. There's another term that I would like to talk about, and that is cultural diffusion. most innovations that are introduced into culture, they are all results of borrowing from other cultures. And this process is known as cultural diffusion. So the spreading of cultural items from one culture to another is called cultural diffusion. And diffusions are not bound to innovations, as they can be extended in customs, they could be behaviors. Sometimes the diffusions happen in society very quickly. I'm sure COVID-19, you got impact and you've been affected by the whole virus. But the way easily people agreed to receive the vaccines, that is called cultural diffusion. But in some cases, the cultural diffusion may not happening. For example, when a devoted religious person, when he or she moves into a new society where the religion is different. Now, having studied and conducted research studies in the field of applied linguistics and cultural linguistics for many years, I would like to offer a definition of culture that I like it very much. This definition has been given by a prominent, well-recognized Muslim scholar and philosopher, Allama Ja'fari. He believed that instead of searching what exactly culture is, we should try to create a pioneer culture. That is to say, regardless of what culture these days mean, we have to hunt for what culture must be. To him, a pioneer culture improves human lives, and it helps human beings achieve their final goals. Okay, now this is actually I'm getting to the end of my presentation, and I'm going to talk about the culture and language teaching. Okay, according to Bennett, Bennett was a very, very famous scholar, is a very famous scholar. The person who learns language without learning culture risks becoming a fluent fool. So language without culture is absolutely meaningless. In 1984, the American Council on Teaching Foreign Languages, they introduced the first skill-based guidelines for cultural competence. And although the council later on removed the guidelines, the impact was so deep that cultures received its own place in teaching foreign languages. Today, almost all applied linguists agree that culture should stand next to the other four language skills. And some of them, they even consider culture as the fifth language skill. For instance, here we go. These are the giving out flowers custom. The type of flower is very important in some context. The colors are very important. Even the numbers matters. For instance, in Russia, if you would like, perhaps you learn about that culture. If you would like to give a bunch of flowers to someone, and if it's considered to be gift, it is supposed to be odd numbers. But if you're going to attend a funeral, it should be even numbers, and usually 12 numbers. Now, so when culture is considered as the fifth language skill, it's an individual should be able to understand cultural differences. He or she must be able to accept cultural differences and should be able to respect cultural differences. So when an individual learns a language without its associated culture, they have separated themselves from the society. As a matter of fact, linguistic knowledge doesn't include political, social, let's say religious and economic systems. Some famous linguists like Chomsky, they believe that if human brain is considered as a box, when syntax and vocabulary are added and the box shaken properly, the language would be produced. But this idea was criticized strongly. And nowadays, almost every scholar agrees that to communicate effectively, individuals should have a proper cultural understanding. So we've already agreed that culture should be considered as part of language teaching. The next question is, what culture should be taught? It's a very important question. generally, culture is divided into two C's, small c and big C. According to Garza, the big C culture is mainly, it focuses on who are the great writers or artists or musicians, or what are the lasting famous works of art, music, and literature. What are the great moments in the culture's history? But the little c is about things such as the features of daily lives, popular culture, social mores, and so on. So the question is, to what extent do we have to teach about big C or little c? Let's imagine you're going to teach English language, because I belong to the Department of English Language. Let's say you're going to teach English language to your students. And of course, you're going to tell them about the culture, that culture that is associated with the British-speaking countries, English-speaking countries, I'm sorry. Now, if you visited Britain, you might have been experiencing these scenarios that I'm going to tell you about. You've been going to shopping and you've probably visited a shopping center, like a supermarket, and the cashier might be calling you, hello, love. This is something that you might be surprised. I'm not like love, okay? Especially if there's an opposite sex involved. So if the cashier calls you love, you might be offended because we are not related, and how come you're calling me your love? And other contexts like Valentine or Halloween or maybe blind date, these are the scenarios. Are we supposed to teach our students? We are living in a part of the world where these things may not be common or even may not be appropriate. So I'm sure you can come up with some ideas in your context, Uzbekistan. For instance, in my context in Iran, something like blind date is very, very inappropriate. It's not accepted at all. Or Valentine is not something that should be, practiced well. Now, there's another problem here. Most countries, they import their materials from contexts like America, okay? And in those course books, in those textbooks, America is portrayed mainly as the ideal world. It's a superpower. So when the teenagers, or let's say youngsters, they start learning about a language, mainly they are imposed to culture which is supposed to be superpower culture. And those learners, most of the time, they consider their own culture as grey or inferior. But here's the problem: how we can use these textbooks to teach the language without affecting or putting our learners in danger of losing their own identity. I'd like to conclude this talk by a quote from Gramsci. She's a good friend of mine. She's very famous. And those who are doing linguistics or applied linguistics, they are familiar with her works. According to her, she's got a very nice quotation. I would like to read it from my own text here. For economic or emotional reasons, youngsters see in their foreign culture new ways of dreaming themselves. At an age when they are trying to find out who they are, the foreign language very often symbolizes other cultural horizons. Of course, what they want to escape is precisely what they will try to recover later, when they are 50 or 60. The challenge for language teacher is to prepare them both for this voyage of discovery and for their own return voyage when later in life they will discover who they are in light of their own encounter with others. So the other debate about culture is about issues of national and social identity in a world of rapidly changing, where computer technologies and satellites have increased the gap between generations. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. That was the end of my presentation. I guess once again, thank you, and I would be very, very happy to answer questions if there are.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Professor Mahdi Dahmardehning. Dahmardeh. Very nice, very detailed, and very colorful presentation you presented. And I strongly agree with what you said. Yeah, I mean, lack of authentic materials, lack of cultural knowledge of the target language, and sometimes poor textbooks, limited exposure to authentic culture environment and native culture interference. These are the, it's considered to be the main problems of language teaching as well. And sometimes what we can say is like, if I remember the time like the 90s when I was learning English language and other languages as well, like French, Korean, for example, the poor textbook or not very good, experienced and competent foreign language teachers, sometimes they couldn't actually transfer the authentic cultural values of that country. And sometimes I think that the incompetence of one's own culture also makes it a great problem as well. For example, a local guy, Uzbek guy, who's not even being aware of his own cultures. I mean, he was raised up in the downtown of the city and thinking that the culture, just the school, the shopping, or the weekend, bicycle, etc. So being completely ignorant of his own culture, he's learning a foreign language, and he thinks that a foreign culture predominantly very rich, very colorful, very amazing, and has a long history. And he, being aware or non-aware, completely inherits, I mean, that foreign culture and thinks that being in a foreign culture, it's actually really very good. So, which means that it's like learning a foreign language. First, you should be very competent in your own language. Then you can have a good foreign language competence. You can compare the linguistic properties of two different languages, and you can be very successful in the foreign language as well. So what you now, also the video, for example, you showed at the very beginning. I used to live in South Korea for 7 years, and I know what does it mean. But eating with the chopsticks, having a noise while you are having the food. For example, in my culture, it's unaccepted. I mean, you should be completely silent, no any noise. Absolutely, it's otherwise it's disgusting, disrespectful, not obeying the norms of the society, etc. So and again, I mean, the presentation you showed again proves that people who are teaching a language or people who are explaining the language, linguists, are the most tolerant job holders in the world, because I used to live in Bosnia and Herzegovina for 8 years, and Bosnian being the part of like Persian, part of Indo-European language group, they mostly use direct speech rather than indirect speech. So like English, it's why English is more polite, because they focus on indirect speech. For example, they will say, "Excuse me, could you open the door, please?" But Bosnians, they will say, "Open the door," without any linguistic accessoire using. So you will think that Bosnians are a very rude nation. No. Actually affected by linguistic accessoire. So I really appreciate your presentation, and I really enjoyed it. And also Claire Crouch, I mean, I met him personally twice, one in a AAAL, and it was in Florida. And I invited her as a main plenary speaker in one of my conferences in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and she stayed in Sarajevo for almost 1 week. So we are also good friends. And she is the former president of ILA as well. And very nice lady, yes. And really appreciate your presentation, Dr. Dahmardeh. You're using also very nice images from Uzbek culture as well, which means that before making a presentation, you considered whether the images should be relevant to the presentation, which means that you also learn something from about Uzbekistan while searching all these images. And yeah, I mean, as I said, this is the very initial phase of our project, guest lecture series, and you are the first. Actually, you will be in the history as the first speaker of the event, and after the event, for sure, you will receive your certificate by email. Yeah, I mean, this is my comments. If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please feel free.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Akbarov. That was amazing. Very nice compliment. I'm flattered, in fact, and I'm very happy to be here. I guess this would be a very nice starting point for having this whole discussion. And I've got this experience, my personal experience, living in different parts of the world when it comes to culture. And I guess this is so important. We teach the culture in a way. When we're teaching a language to our students, it has to be supplemented by the culture. We are not supposed to neglect the culture. And the problem, another problem that I guess in countries, especially in our region, people might be suffering is the grey culture that I refer to in my presentation. People are considering their own cultures grey, and when they're facing new cultures, so it's very easy for them to just lose their own identity, lose their own culture, because they are not empowered with their own culture. So again, thank you, and I would be very happy to answer questions, or I would be very happy to hear comments.
Good afternoon once more. May I give some comments?
Please, I would be happy, please.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting topic, which is related with culture. And nowadays we have a subject, cross-cultural communication. That is one of the most interesting subjects at the faculty. And recently we have published textbook on cross-cultural communication. I think that this lecture was very, very useful, not only for us and for my students too, who are participating through this our university. And I would like to express my gratitude that you have selected very nice pictures, and video material was very, very interesting. I think that for our further textbooks, manuals, or some other handouts, I'll try to use the same content, or maybe something like in order to ask a question, like I appreciated this video material, which was not only interesting for everybody, for future teachers too, because our students ask such kind of questions: how can I teach, or how do I react to such kind of situation? And our students are very interested in different cultures. Even we have English weeks. During these English weeks, even they try to speak Indian English, or to, for example, they have organized different festivals. I think that this lecture was the first and the best one for all of us. Thank you very much. I hope that we'll wait for your another lectures, which are closely related to culture or communication. Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jamila, and I'm really happy that you like it. And that was what I said in the very beginning of my presentation. I hope by the end of the day, people will be happy to have something to learn something rather than wasting their time in my presentation. And I've just presented my email address, so I would be very happy if you would like to be in touch, and perhaps we can have some joint collaboration. That would be very nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Akbarov, your microphone is muted. We don't have your voice.
Yes, sorry, yes. Let me ask the question then, if there is no any question, just to tease you with the question. Yeah, because there are a lot of comments. Let's ask the question. So regarding the, you mentioned about the Chomsky. So I met him twice in his office back in 2013, because Chomsky, even though he is not very popular in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because he says that the term genocide cannot be used for the Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's only used for the Holocaust, for the Jews. So that's why Bosnian people are not very happy with him, because there was a genocide actually in 1993, 1995 in Srebrenica for Bosnian Muslim. My question is with the Vygotsky, because according to social-cultural theorist Vygotsky, because he says that the language comes out from cultural and social activity. Yes, that was actually mentioned in your presentation. So from culture and from social activity, because that's how you will learn actually the pragmatics of a language and social linguistic parameters of the language. That's how you can differentiate between you as a singular and you as a plural, which is also important in Uzbek, because Uzbek, it's a highly honorific language, like Korean, Japanese, and plus Persian, because in Persian also you should differentiate to whom you should say shuma or tu, for example. Otherwise, you will be in trouble with the taxi drivers or with the shopkeepers and in Iran. Yes, and the question is, how as an individual language learner should reconstruct his mind and be ready for all these psychological issues? Or let's paraphrase, how does culture influence language acquisition? What are the parameters? Because as you said, the Chomsky with his universal theory, as you said, you will put the vocabulary in this innate device into box, shake it, and then you have a ready language. So how does culture influence language acquisition? Whether we need the cultural parameters in language acquisition. For example, nowadays there are criteria to be admitted by foreign universities like SAT examination or IELTS or GRE or TOEIC in Korea. So usually, from my perspective, the cultural essence, value is omitted. You are completely trained for the language competence to use the language in a very grammatical proper way, but the culture is omitted. I mean, having the 8 score in IELTS doesn't mean that you are linguistically and socio-linguistically and psycholinguistically actively competent. So which means that it's like a training text, like text readers or text conveyors of a language. So this is my question, actually.
That's a very, very good question. Thank you very much indeed. Well, yes, you're absolutely right. The whole idea between what Vygotsky claimed as ZPD zone of proximal development, what he's been referring to, and very, very famous for that. But let me explain it. Let me tell you first my personal experience. Ages ago, when for the very first time I was visiting Britain, and that was the very first time I went there, I was ill and I was looking for medicine. So I was asking, let's say, bypasser, a British person, say, excuse me, do you happen to know where the drugstore is? And he was shocked. He said, drugstore? And I said, yes, drugstore. He said, we don't do drugs here. We don't do drugs here, mate. And I was just said, what? You don't do drugs here? I didn't mean drugs. What do you mean by drugs? And then I realized that is an American context, because I was trained in Iran. The whole education system is mainly American. I mean, in terms of English language teaching. And I was trained in a way that if I want to go for a chemist or pharmacy, I have to say drugstore. So this is a very good question. When you are training your language learners or those who are going to learn the language, we have to first of all conduct a very important thorough needs analysis. And that needs analysis would define our goals or objectives. For instance, you were referring to IELTS. If you earn or get 8 in IELTS as a score, does it mean that you are culturally competent? No, definitely not. This is a problem. We have to understand if our language learners are going to travel or live in another country, or they're just going to learn for the sake of the language. These are two different stories. And then, based on the context, sometimes we have to feed them with materials which are culturally relevant. And at the same time, as I mentioned, the problem is endangering people's social culture, their own identity. There's also another problem here. So I would say, personally, because I'm already involved in developing many books in terms of teaching English language. And here, what we've got is, first of all, we have to find out about the cultural conflicts. You were saying about the downtown, what people might be thinking they're learning a language, but then at the same time, you're facing an issue that people are using very often swear words that they learn from Hollywood films because they think that's a language. Well, and I believe you've got experience, and I've got experience. People do understand that the language is not those words. No, of course not. The language is what people are communicating. So basically, when we are going to teach a foreign language, we have to understand about the cultural conflicts, those issues that are in conflict, in contrast with the source culture. So we can either ignore them, or we have to teach them in a way that they won't raise their sensitivity in the society. Because, for instance, in my context, in Iran, there are sensitive issues that should never be addressed in a classroom. So I would say it all depends on the learner's needs, what they are going to train them for, if they are going to travel to another country, if they are going to learn a language for the sake of it. So these are different stories that we have to consider when we are considering the issue of teaching foreign language, especially when you're going to integrate the issue of culture within the course.
Yeah, and also, yeah, very nice, detailed reply to my question. Very nice, thank you. And also, it's quasi question and comment also. So regarding the pioneer culture of Allama Jafari, you said, right? Yeah, I mean, I like this idea because, yeah, I mean, in globalization, while you are receiving the textbook from different foreign countries and you should teach them. And imagine, I mean, the high school in a very remote area in Iran or Uzbekistan, I mean, they had a textbook. And sometimes the textbook could be full of subliminal messages. I mean, teaching a foreign language doesn't mean teaching linguistic properties, teaching linguistic properties embedded within the subliminal cultural hidden message, which is you are not noticing, but the kids are learning and imitating that culture because nowadays, unfortunately, in the era of the ignorant generation, they are imitating whatever comes to their mind, either from Afghanistan, Iran, or America, or Brazil, whatever. Because they're fed up with the environment they're living in, and they would like to try something different. That's what even the adults are doing, sometimes selecting different restaurants to go for the dinner or lunch because they're fed up with the one they're always going. So they need to have something different experience. So different experience doesn't mean that it's a good for you because you are experiencing first time. Maybe you don't like the waiter, or the food is not good, or the quality of the food, or the placement, the color, etc. And so, but since you are adult and you can compare the restaurant, cafe, the kids, they cannot compare whether the culture is good or bad. So sometimes all the subliminal messages are coming through. And that's why some of the countries, very conservative countries, they have the customized books. For example, they may omit some of the chapters of the book, which is not relevant to the culture of the country. It doesn't matter, it's Islamic or Christian or Jew culture, but they can say it's a threat to the very pillar of the culture, and they can customize the book. So my question is whether the high schools or universities in Iran, they can work with the ministry and have such a customized books in Iran.
Yeah, thank you. That's sorry, I was muted. Okay, thank you. That was a very important one. That's why I was referring in my presentation as grey culture. The problem that teenagers, youngsters, that's why they are referring to as grey culture. They consider their own culture as inferior when they're facing the superior culture. As you said, they're fed up with our environment and they're looking for something new. And that is something that we might be considering as superior. So that is why they are always looking for new things. In Iran, we do have the course books. They are all developed by the Ministry of Education. We've got a Ministry of Education. We've got locally developed course books. Right now, I'm head of a project. It's an international project in the Middle East. I'm considering the course books, and we've got members, teammates from Saudi Arabia, from United Arab Emirates, got Egypt, and almost all countries in the Middle East. And we are considering the course books from the cultural perspective that are taught at schools, in secondary schools in Iran and all of these regions. And we have found out a very amazing result so far. So basically, some countries like Iran have got their own locally developed course books, and they are prescribed to schools. The schools are only allowed to use those course books. They're not allowed to use any other type of course books. But some countries, and they are developed by Iranian authors, but some countries, let's say like Saudi Arabia or Turkey, or Turkey, they call it these days, they changed the name, Turkey, they've got the course books developed by international publishers. But the cultural materials are the ones that are prescribed by the governments. So that's a different story. And you've got some countries like, if I remember correctly, Oman, those are the books that are published in Britain or America. They import them into the country. So this is the whole way of considering the issue of culture in different parts of the world. And I'm sure you're familiar with other contexts where they're using the American books or British ones or Australian ones or Canadian ones. But in general, in Iran, as I said, we've got private institutes. In those private institutes, the only materials that are taught are the ones that are imported from other countries, especially English-speaking countries. But in our schools, the situation is different. They're only allowed to use course books that are developed by the Ministry of Education. I wonder if it's the same in Uzbekistan or it's different.
Yes, okay. There is a question in chat box by Professor Jamila Jumabayeva, and she says, your opinion concerning the usage of gestures when you are not sure, are there any differences? I mean, do they play a great role in communication?
Okay, gestures play a big role in communication, but I should point out that gestures differ among other nations. Yes, that's what I was saying in my presentations, because a symbol, a gesture, a body language might be appropriate in my language, but it may not be appropriate in another, and vice versa. So this would be, again, in different cultures. So we are not sure, are there any differences? I'm not really following the question. Oh, the gestures, of course, they play a great role in communication, you know, showing the back of your shoes. Do you think that's appropriate? In some contexts, like Jordan, I've heard it's very insult. They're not supposed to show the back of your shoes because that's an insult to the host. But in some contexts, it's possible. Or we got a context in our country called Tarov. I don't know if you're familiar with that, if you've ever heard of it, Tarov. Especially it's very Iranian custom. Yeah.
Oh, I was really very shocked in Iran with the Tarov.
Yeah, this is what we do, you know, and this is a gesture of politeness. So when we reach to the door, people are just saying, after you, it's going to be a fight, you know, you're going to have to do it hundreds of times. So this is what we do. This is the gesture of politeness. It would be very offending to some people. I don't know if we managed to answer the question.
Very nice. We are very thankful for your nice speech and presentation, Dr. Dahmardeh. I do believe in a very soon time we will have availability, and hopefully next time you will be here as individually, physically here in our conference, and you will enjoy the cultural similarities with Uzbekistan and Iran, because we are sharing a very good legacy, both in linguistic perspective and also historical perspective and cultural perspective in terms of Navruz and all the similar events. Really appreciate, and all the best to you, Dr. Dahmardeh. I do believe people who are here, they really enjoyed the time being with you here online, and thank you for accepting our short notice despite your very busy schedule. And as I introduced at the very beginning, you are running different projects and you are in different positions also, and also you're a professor teaching, you have your workload, and appreciate your time being with us, and welcome to Uzbekistan, and hope to see you very soon.
Well, thank you. Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to meeting you in person in Uzbekistan. Thank you, everyone, for attending these talk of mine, and thanks for being with me. Thank you. Okay, take a good care of yourself. Goodbye then.